My name is Mina Ricky,
And I am Lydia Korjuk.
and this is Decode REI.
Discover your perfect real estate investment match with Decode REI.
Your matchmaker in the world of real estate.
Let us find your investment soulmate and make your heart and wallet happy.
Today we are interviewing Jack Pettinger, a longtime Wisconsin resident. His work on hundreds of multifamily transactions with cumulative loans and development costs totaling nearly $3 billion.
Jack has been responsible for credit recommendation and deal structuring on projects around the nation.
His project experience ranges from ground up affordable construction to stabilized Class A market rate projects with a wide range of financing tools such as bonds, first position debt, subordinate debt, low income housing tax credit, historic tax credits, and private grants.
Jack believes that affordable housing and real estate investing do not have to be at odds with each other and encourages everyone to investigate generating wealth via real estate investing with maintaining affordable and safe space for their residents.
To date, Jack is most proud of his work on a $100 million project that sits on the Chicago skyline and provides clean, safe, and affordable housing to hundreds of Chicago residents.
If you see Jack outside of work, you'll see him participating in triathlons, events, water skiing, or doing everything in the great outdoors.
And welcome, Jack.
Welcome, Jack.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So before we actually start our official interview, I start out always with tell us a funny story about being a multifamily owner and operator.
Oh gosh, there's so many disasters I could choose from. What I'll tell you today, though, is when I first was starting out in my multifamily career, we were redoing a building, and the contractor told me that if I bought and picked up all the materials, he would give me a significant discount. Well,
Hmm.
I was so young and dumb. I was excited. I said, "Oh, I'm going to get a discount." And I went and picked up all these siding materials and roofing materials, and I had them in my Suburban, and I could not see a thing out of any of the windows. My driver's side window had framing next to me. I couldn't see out the passenger side. I couldn't see out the back. So I ended up getting my sister in the vehicle, and I said, "You're going to have to tell me if I'm going to hit something." Every time I went to turn right, left, switch lanes, I said, "Let me know if I'm gonna hit something and let me know how far over I am." And it's ridiculous things like that. Looking back, it makes me laugh. I would highly advise everyone not to do that. But it's funny. It's fun to say, "Hey, we did this because we wanted to get started." And sometimes your own time and effort and sometimes safety in the car is the best way to do that.
There are so many things that come our way when we're starting a new business or a new enterprise. It's impossible to read or to study or to know everything that is going to come our way. So you just have to roll with it. It's just like, all right, sister, you're on. And
Yeah, you're on. Don't let me hit anything.
yes, Jack, before we really get going with the interview, I'd like you to tell us your story because when I first met you and you were telling me what you do for a living, I was like, this guy is so ready and prepared. And he actually gets paid to do this, except he does it for other people. But tell us about your career, please.
Sure, I mean, I'd love to, but if I do that, I'm gonna chuckle. And you say I was so ready and prepared, and I'll tell you, when I jumped in, I was like, I am so not ready. I am not prepared. Everyone is smarter than me. They know more than me. So that's first and foremost. But for the audience, I have been a multifamily underwriter for the past 5-ish years. I used to work at Freddie Mac doing agency debt, and then from that, I moved into affordable housing. The underwriting has comprised of anything from market rate Class A to round up affordable construction. And I have touched a lot of different tools, whether that's low income housing tax credits, first mortgages, secondary liens, historic tax credits, government bonds, and any type of funding you could imagine I have probably worked with and touched before.
Wow, that's huge. I'm sure that a lot of our listeners probably like, "Oh my god." And you felt like you didn't know what you were doing? That's just that just blows my mind away.
Yeah, I truly started and I felt like a rookie. I think everyone has to start there no matter what your experience is, whether you started as a multifamily underwriter or you started as an engineer. We all start in the same boat, trying to make our lives better through multifamily.
And the one thing that I was very surprised is that you actually do like that section of affordable housing. And I guess it's because you've seen the writing on it, right? You see how it works, you understand it, but you also have a very personal connection to it. Would you share that with us, please?
With the affordable housing? Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. I grew up in a very low income neighborhood. I think it was about 35% of my high school did not graduate. And a lot of the reasons behind that is we had 16 and 17-year-old kids helping to pay rent and mortgages for their parents. And what I tell everyone is when you see that, you don't get to walk away. So I do feel a very personal connection and a drive to give back and create affordable housing. And normally when you say affordable housing, people think that's anti to profit. I
Mhm.
totally disagree. I think you can have affordable, safe, and clean housing, and you can also turn a decent profit on it. I do not think those 2 are at odds.
Wow, that's awesome. I want to talk about your strategy. What strategy do you use to identify the property and to make it more profitable?
Well, to identify upfront, I always prefer stabilized property. And there's a big debate in multifamily, and people will say stabilized or value add. The truth is, those two can come together. You could get a stabilized property with a value add component.
Mhm.
Something I really love to do is to implement RUBS, which is a ratio utility bill back, and essentially have these tenants pay for the water bill, the trash bill, maybe part of the gas bill that you've been paying all this time. It truly pulls down your expenses a lot and it gives the tenants a lot more responsibility, saying, "Oh, I'm paying for that utility now. Maybe I'm going to
Mhm.
conserve it a little bit more." Big fan of RUBS. I'm also a big fan of alternate security deposits. So instead of putting a security deposit forward, you can use a program like Sure Deposit or Rhino Security Deposits, and then you can juice your NOI with a move in fee.
That's very differently because usually you hear people do value adds and you're just basically operation, make it operational. That's interesting. Any red flags that, when you identify the property that pops up that you say, you know what, I'm going to pass on this property. What's your major red flag when you underwrite property?
Okay, so hard nose for me personally. If there is an environmental issue,
Mhm.
I have no interest in touching the building. Environmental issues can take anywhere from 2 to 5 years to resolve. They are usually not quick processes. So I personally stay 100% away. Violent crime, also not
Mhm.
something I'm interested in dealing with. If we're talking about a few people dealing weed, we'll deal with it. We can work with that and, work on cleaning up the tenant base. If there's violent crime, though, I want my tenants to feel safe and I want to feel safe going to the property. If I wouldn't live there, I'm not going to buy it.
Mm.
In addition, it's very hard to finance properties that have had violent crime. A lot of banks have a 2-year look back window, and if there's any sort of
Mm.
assault, murder,
Really?
weaponry incidents, they will not finance the property. So those are my 2 big ones. I think the third would be more of a market consideration. If there's a
Mhm.
declining population, that property is most likely going to lose value. So if I see a declining market population, I typically walk away.
Wow. So in tune. So you mentioned environmental, and right away I'm thinking, okay, what is environmental? Can you expand? Like, what do you consider environmental? Because probably some of our listeners would be like, what is that?
Sure. Environmental is a broad range. And this could be anything from neighboring properties
Hmm.
having old uses that could cause soil contamination or air pollution. And that to this day, that old gas station is no longer there, can affect the quality of living for your tenants. So we're talking about soil contamination, water contamination, air contamination. A lot of people will consider asbestos and mold part of
Hmm.
environmental. And when you put all that together, you have a significant problem to resolve. And those problems are not cheap and they are not easy to resolve in order for the EPA to give you approval and say, yes, tenants can still live here or we'll allow you to renovate the building in XYZ way. Did that clarify?
Yeah, thank you.
Like you say, it might mean so many things in so many different situations, but definitely it's a big deal. Hey, I'm curious. This is my favorite questions to ask the operators. And it has to do with your investors and your customers or your tenant base, your residents. Because on one hand, you are being wholesome about renting apartments. You don't want to just raise rents like everybody else is doing just for the sake of being able to do it, right? And on the other hand, you do have to bring value to your investors and say, I am buying this property, you are supporting me in buying this property, I will give you a return. What is your thinking? How do you go into that business model?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the age-old adage of a free market economy, right? We have to do what's best for our investors and shareholders, but how does that collide and intersect with taking care of the world, taking care of the planet, taking care of the customers? In the multifamily space, what I'll tell you, and this is very surprising, there is data to back this up. Rent is not the most important thing a tenant cares about.
Hmm.
It isn't. It's property maintenance and it's condition of the property. They want to know they're being valued, their maintenance requests are being heard, and that property is being taken care of. When you put that into perspective, if we can come in as owners and say, hey, tenant XYZ, we are going to raise rent $50, but in exchange, we're really going to clean up the property. We're going to give you new LVP flooring. We're going to respond to your maintenance requests right away. We're going to put new washers and dryers in. All of a sudden, those two goals have come together. The tenants would rather pay $50 more and have the property taken care of.
Absolutely. We're going back to customer service, which is a big topic of today's day.
Definitely. So you mentioned we. I want to talk about your team. Team is everything in this business. You can't do nothing in multifamily space or commercial space without a team. Who's in your team?
Oh gosh, I know I'm gonna miss some of them because it's so good. Well, it's so good and big, I should say. But the team, I'm super proud of my team and very passionate about them. We'll start with external. We have external lawyers,
Hmm.
external syndication attorneys. We have an
Okay.
external CPA who does our tax filing. We have property managers. We have inspectors that come see the property beforehand. We work with the brokers to get the properties in our pipeline. And then, of course, the title companies to close. Those are all just our external parties, people on the outside that we hire in and work with. Internally, we have capital raisers, we have asset managers, we have folks who guarantee our loans, and then we have folks like me who generally operate the property that we call operators. And you can even break those down into farther categories. Within our operations side, we have secretaries, we have folks we call organizers who put all our meetings on the calendar, and then we also have an internal CPA. So hopefully I did not miss anyone. If I did miss you and you're listening to this podcast, we love you. We appreciate you. You're a valued member of the team.
Wow. That
Do you get to know those people from work? I mean, you have relationships with a lot of people in the business.
Yes, that's an interesting question. I do have relationships through work, but actually, all of those people I just mentioned were through networking.
hmm,
And when you start networking, you can start asking for recommendations. Hey, do you know a good property management in this area? Hey, do you know a good debt broker? People are very transparent in the multifamily industry. It feels like we want everyone else to succeed. Whether you have 0 units or 500, if you ask for my assistance, I'm going to do the best I can to provide value to you. And while I'm saying I have this big team, this was not an overnight process. We built this team over the course of 2 years, and they rotate. We have lawyers who work on one subject and not another. We have investors that rotate in and out. We have CPAs that we change around for different subjects.
Wow, that's a big team. How do you keep up with them?
I don't know sometimes. I'd really say the key to keeping up with any team, though, is organization and delegation. If you can organize and delegate, be very clear whose responsibility each project is, be very clear when the due date is, and have a system to manage that, you'll do just fine. Specifically, my team uses ClickUp, very similar to Mondays.com or any other organizational platform you may have heard of. And with all that said, like I said, organization, key, absolutely. Delegation, key. But communication is what ties it all together. Communicate with people. Hey, Lydia, I saw this project was due yesterday. It didn't get across the finish line. Is there anything I can do to help? What's going on? Is there anything I should be aware of? When you tie that all together and put that third communication piece in there, you built a really strong, high functioning team. And all of a sudden, these big projects seem a little less big because you're all working in conjunction.
So, tying that into the next question, Jack, what does your day to day look like? Because I know you're still working your W 2, maybe not for long, but what does it look like? I know you're a busy guy. I know you wake up like, yeah, tell us.
Yeah. I will tell you, well, first and foremost, I'm a big believer in getting your day started off right. Whenever you get up, whether that's early or late, I think the first thing you should do is meditate, take a run, do some stretches, start moving your body, and then follow that up by a cold shower. A little bit of a side note from real estate, but that's generally how I start my day off. You're correct, Mina. I am still in the W 2, and a lot of folks get to the point they say, how can I grow in multifamily and still be in my W 2 career? Schedule time blocks for yourself. I don't care if it's from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Put it on your calendar and say, this is when I am going to review 2 multifamily deals. That actually is my exact target. I try to underwrite 2 multifamily deals per day. This isn't always a full underwrite. Sometimes this can be a quick income and expense analysis, and then compare that against the asking price and essentially the DCR that comes out of that. Is this a feasible project? If it's not even close, I'm going to throw it away. But you know what? It's one more project off my list. That's kind of the finding the projects. On the operational side, I'll say this. If you are involved every day to day, every second, I think you've done something wrong. Our goal is to get out of the W 2 job. I see myself as a manager of the managers.
Mhm.
And how I do that with my properties is I give them all my cell phone number. I say, if there's ever an emergency, you can text me. And then I put calls on the calendar for those property managers and the investors. I say every 2 weeks, I'm checking in with my investors up front, and then we'll slowly shift back to a month after the property's been performing. We've done the rent raises. Property managers, every 2 weeks, I am on the phone. I am saying, what is this expense? Can you tell me about the vacancy? Are we pushing rents this month? What are our goals? Can you go over our KPIs? What is going on with this property? You have to have a good handle on the property, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're at the property every day, you're texting your property manager every day. Absolutely not. Hire a team you trust,
Mhm.
manage them, guide them, and let them do what they do best.
And then at some point, I guess it's going to be, I mean, it's just depends how things are going because I've heard over and over and over again the painful truth of finding a good manager for your property. And so I guess I don't know, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it gets to the root point. There are a lot of bad property managers out there. I would say never just take the first property manager you come across. You need to be doing an in depth interview with not only the first property management you come across, but at least two others. Be upfront about your expectations. Be upfront about how often you want to communicate with them. If you want to drive rents, what your business plan is, and make sure they fit into that. I would say that eliminates 80% of the problems. Now, sometimes those property managers can talk smooth and they just don't perform. In that case, you be very clear. Be quick to hire, be quick to fire. If you are not doing your job and you are not showing any signs of improvement with consistent feedback from the operators and investors, you are out. I will put a different property management in a heartbeat because we are paying you an awful lot of money to take care of an asset, and we are not going to pay you that amount of money if the asset is not being properly taken care of.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Asset is everything. So I want to take you back to the numbers since I'm a numbers person and Mina more like a people person. When you look at the expenses ratio, what is one thing that you see that you can improve? You mentioned rubs, anything else that kind of like when you underwrite that you look at it and be like, oh, you know what? I think I can totally do this better.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of people go down this path of, oh, I'm going to lower the expenses.
Hmm.
I tend to lean more towards I'm going to raise the income because, as most of us know, expenses trend up anywhere from 3 to 5% a year on average. If you're trying to cut expenses, I'm a little nervous unless there's a clear reason. But there are several examples. Water leaks at the property that weren't being addressed. If you're going to do a renovation because there's been so many repair issues, that'll drive down your repair costs. Absolutely. Those are two big ones. Try to think what other expenses we try to lower sometimes. We see cable contracts a lot that are not being charged for. I would just cut the cable contract unless it's truly a class A property where tenants are expecting that. Get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Search for unnecessary expenses, or a lot of times just expenses that you can pull out that shouldn't truly have been part of the T12 and operational expenses. I'll see this a lot with operators putting their travel expense in a T12.
Hmm.
Pull it out. Pull it out. Put it on your taxes. Do not put it on the T12 unless it is your property management doing that travel. I'll also see mortgage interest a lot. Folks, mortgage interest is a below the line item. That means it is below the NOI, not before it. Look for those key things that don't truly belong above the line in the T12 and are negatively affecting the NOI. Probably the biggest one I see is capital improvements.
Hmm.
Oh, we replaced the roof. It was a $20,000 expense. No, it wasn't. It was a $20,000 capital improvement. Pull that below the NOI line. Your NOI just jumps $20,000 on paper.
Totally agree with you. Very good approach.
Hey, Jack, I'm curious. Did you have properties before you started working as an underwriter? And the question is actually, well, that's just a side question, but the question is, what have you learned about yourself throughout this business of being a property owner? And what have you learned about the world that you didn't know prior that you thought I need to share this?
Wow, these are tough questions. I'll answer the first question. I did not have any property prior to going into my underwriting career. But I will also say, folks, for the record, I was a broke college student before then. And within 1 year of getting into my career, I started purchasing multifamily properties. I think your second question is something I learned about myself. I learned something really negative and really positive about myself. It is really easy to quit. It's
Mm.
easy to get frustrated with investors. It's easy to get frustrated with property management. And most importantly, it's easy to get frustrated with yourself and say, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough. I can't tell you how often those things went through my head. The other thing I learned about myself is I won't quit. Through all of that negative, we have made it through and I am growing. We have plans to grow to 500 units in the next 4 years. and I'd like to see the business at 3,000 units in the next 10. Those are aggressive expansion plans. Now, for something I learned about the world, I really believe this and not everyone does. Karma counts. The world
True.
gives back to you if you give back to the world. Something we're really passionate about at my company is making sure every time we close a building, immediately there is a positive effect either in the community or in the world. So we took our entire acquisition fee on our last project, which was 34 units, and we donated it. We asked our investors, we said, "Do you have any charities you're passionate about? Please let us
Mhm.
know, and we are going to send this money to those charities."
Wow.
We did that, A, because it feels good, but B, because karma works, people. Investors understand that you're not just trying to make money, you want to give back to the world. Those organizations start giving you positive feedback. It multiplies. There is nothing that can replace good karma and positive feedback and communication from external partners.
And even not only to call it karma, but to call it there is an action and then there is a response from those actions. There is always a consequence. And even if nobody's looking, by the fact of giving, you're actually opening up yourself to receiving more. I love that, Jack. That was well put.
Yeah, that's amazing, Jack. That's impressive. So a lot of our listeners are passive investors. They're probably, professionals that work and looking to invest into real estate passively. What advice would you give them?
That's a great question. I would say get to know your operator. If you're going to passively invest with someone, I expect you to be on a first name basis with them and that you can call or text them if there's an emergency. I think a lot of passive investors say, "Oh, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of effort. I don't really want to do that. Here, you've done this before. Take my money." I disagree. I really think the first step is to trust the person you are investing with. Because if you don't trust that person, even if the deal looks amazing, I think things can go south really quickly. So that's my first piece of advice. The second piece of advice I would say is request backup information.
Mhm.
Even if it's as simple as, "Can I see your underwriting? Can I see a T12?" I don't even care if you review it. Ask for it. If that operator says no, you put up a red flag right away. Why not? Because operators should be transparent, and they should say, "If there's an issue with this T12, here's our plan." And if they're not willing to provide that to you, that's probably not an operator you wanna get in bed with, for lack of a better term.
Totally agree with you. Open the books and be open and like the person you invest with. I'm with you 100%. So final question is, I always ask this question to all of our, operators. Imagine you have a crystal ball in your hands and you're trying to see the future of the multifamily space. What are you seeing and how are you preparing to see that change?
Oh gosh. Okay, well, my crystal ball is very foggy. There are a lot of changes going on in multifamily right now, still recuperating from COVID. We've just recently seen banks start to crash, which I think is gonna
Hmm.
have an impact on where money is flowing. But I think the biggest change in multifamily is going to come from younger investors. And when I say that, what I mean is you can get information all over the place today. I'm 26 years old. We own nearly 50 units. What's going to happen is as this information gets out, we're going to start taking out mom and pop investment shops. A 50 unit owned by a mom and pop, it's not going to exist in 15 years. We're going to have operators who know what they're doing and are familiar because the information is out there and it's readily available. So the question is, how do we compete then? How do we compare? If there's no mom and pops and we're all looking at each other as competition, how is my building going to stand out against another syndicator's? I think the truth is amenities.
Mm.
I think folks are always looking for more amenities. I recently saw a cool one. There are Amazon storage lockers in the
Mm.
basement of multifamily properties. You are the only one that can get in there. I thought it was cool. Different things like that. Amenities we have not seen before. I'm predicting it right now. The multifamily property that offers a dog walking service will take off.
Hmm,
I think small amenities, small items like that are going to make properties start to stand out, especially as we see mom and pop shops exit this market.
that's awesome.
And that is why we are in social media and YouTube. Is really not for the old time investors. It's for the all these new investors that are looking for other areas where to put their money because yeah, we had the crypto run lately, right? And then we had the bank run lately. And it's like, okay, so what do I do with my 10 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand, whatever it is, right? So yeah, that's very interesting. That's something to pound on. Jack, I thank you so much for coming. We enjoy your conversation. You have a lot of experience. I can't believe you're only 26. I forget that because in my mind, you had at least, 10, 20 years of experience just for all the work that you have put in and all the
Mhm.
hours you have put into it. So we totally appreciate it. We love it. We enjoy your friendship and we're just happy you're here.
That's right. So I want to make sure that our listeners can get hold of you. How can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been on a few podcasts and I always do something uncommon. I
Mhm.
actually give listeners my cell number. And people are like, that's crazy. I saw someone do this on Bigger Pockets one time and I texted the gentleman. I was like, no way this guy is going to text me back. We had an awesome conversation. He texted me back. I got a lot of value from it. So
That's
I
awesome.
will provide my cell number. I think Mina and Lydia, you guys have it and can drop it in the show notes. You guys can also reach out to me at jpettinger at investmidwestcre.com. Or if you guys are listening to this after April 1st, we are trying to get our website up here. It is investmidwestcre.com. Give us a follow on there and let us know if you're interested in any passive investing.
Great.
Yes, we'll put all the links under notes. And for now, happy investing, everybody.
Yes. And thank you, Jack. See you later.
Thank you.